Today's guest was a 26-year-old pizza delivery boy when he decided to change his life. He's now a successful multifamily investor, teacher, and one of the top 3 commercial agents nationally for RE/MAX, having received every award the brokerage offers, including the Lifetime Achievement Award, Hall of Fame Award, and the Circle of Legends Award. He's closed over $300 million in transactions and still finds time to be an active community leader and philanthropist. His story is an inspiration. I'd like to welcome Chris German. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm a fan of your videos. They're always very well informed. They're always backed by a lot of data to support your statements. And, most importantly, I feel like you're a truth teller. And recently we were at that irrational exuberance phase of the market, and a lot of real estate professionals stand to make a lot of money if they continue cheerleading for, investors to jump in. It's going to be great. And you're one of those people that, advised people to proceed with caution. And I think that's the right way, and that's the true way that investors should be proceeding. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's some shark salesmen out there, but anyone can go back and look at the log of, say, the videos that were recorded at our educational events that we do. We coordinate educational luncheons throughout the year for landlords, and you'll see between myself and the individuals that I bring to speak at that event, you call me a truth teller. That's exactly what they are. They don't have a dog in the race, so to speak, other than to tell you, whether it's the real estate attorney or the market forecaster, or if it's the guy speaking on commercial lending, other than to tell the landlords, here's what they see at that moment. Here's where we came from. So from where we came from and where we are currently, this is what we can learn about what may come to be. Then the landlords, the investors can make of it, what they choose to.
I like your team. Do you want to mention who's on your team and what their role is?
Sure. Well, we've had different speakers cycle through, but those that have been with me the longest is Steven Spear of Spear, Woodward, Corbelis, Goldberg, real estate attorney out of Redondo Beach, Bruce Norris of the Norris Group, who is a hard money lender, doesn't like to be called such, but he is a market forecaster. I mean, the guy just has an innate ability to track whether the market's going up or going down. I mean, so kind of eerie, so much to the sense that we held an event in October of last year, and people can go back and watch the footage on YouTube. And he brought up the discussion of, wouldn't it be interesting if we had some sort of systemic event in 2020? Now, of course, he didn't know it was a virus, but he started talking about a systemic event and getting people thinking about a systemic event. And most people thought at that point, maybe the world markets, the world economy. But here we had a systemic event. And so, we had the likes of him, Gil Figueroa, who's a commercial loan broker, over 2 decades, commercial loans. And then somebody like Gianni Galati from Chase Commercial Lending. As you know, Chase has been a very aggressive lender, especially within Los Angeles County. Gianni is another one, a couple of decades worth of experience. So anyways, these type of individuals who actually have been in the industry much longer than I'm a student in the room. I mean, I happen to be the host, but I'm learning at the back of the room alongside the other landlords, so that I can then take that information and say, okay, here's what I see day to day as a realtor. Here's what I'm learning from these other facets of the market. Now, how can we couple it together and ensure our clients are best informed? And so, we like to provide that service.
That's great. So backing up, how did you get into real estate and why?
So how long do we have? Because this,
yeah,
I mean, I think we'll go to 2006. So in 2006, where Chris German, the apartment dealer, found himself, it wasn't so sexy in terms of some name like that. I was a father of 2. My wife and I had been married for a few years. And I literally am by day, a high school security guard, and by night, delivering pizzas. I finally, in December of that year, I said, look, I'm not a dumb guy. I'm motivated. I can work hard if I find something to dive and pour myself into. I need a change. And thanks to God that a guy that I went to high school with, close friend of mine, was one of the best men in my wedding. Out of college, he had went to work for Marcus and Millichap, which is one of the major commercial firms. I saw that he was doing fairly well, and I just approached him and said, "Look, I don't know anything about real estate. I don't know a prelim, title, escrow, none of this. But I know that I can be a good student. If you're willing to teach me, I'll do whatever you need me to do." And of course, being a good friend, he said, "Of course, I'll bring you on." And I had to do this part-time. So I'm still working at the school district Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 sort of thing, in the city of Fontana, for those who are familiar with where that is. And then in the late afternoon, I would drive to downtown Los Angeles, because his one stipulation was this, that I couldn't take away from his business because he was doing very well. And he couldn't teach me long distance, because commercial real estate is not something you can learn long distance. We didn't have Zoom meetings back then or any of this type of technology. And so he said, "You got to come to my office." So Monday through Thursday, I'd go downtown Los Angeles, stay in the office till about 9 o'clock at night, and make the trek back home, back and forth. That's about a 1-hour drive either direction. And got licensed by March of 2007. And by September of 2007, I had made enough money in commissions that I was able to walk away from the school district, dive into commercial real estate full-heartedly. And the success took off from there. That year I was a rookie of the year in that office. The next year I was in the top 10 for that office. And that was hard to do, because I was amongst the likes of individuals that were, making $1 to $2 million in commissions annually. I mean, these guys turned a lot of deals. But it was really a blessing. Number one, people ask me, "Well, Chris, why do you sell apartments? Why don't you sell warehouses?" It just happens to be my senior, that's what we call it, my good friend who taught me the business, he sold multifamily. Had he sold retail, I probably would be selling retail today, to be honest, because I didn't know the difference. I was just looking, for an opportunity. And in that office, I worked alongside some of the most, hardworking, genuine guys who really killed it in the industry. And so that became my perception of what was the norm. You got in at 7 a.m., you left maybe at 8 p.m., you better be out at meetings. This is what was, this is what it took to succeed. There was no, people that were in it just part-time or anything. And so that's who I was surrounded with. So, I came from that culture, and that really helped a lot of the success that I have today.
Yeah, it sounded like you needed to be hungry if you wanted to succeed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning, because now I'm living in Rancho Cucamonga, getting up that early and going into downtown LA so I could avoid the morning traffic, because I had a mantra: first one in, last one out. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the first one in and the last one out, because the way I looked at it at that time is, these other senior agents, if they're making, this type of money, who am I to show up after them and to leave before them if I truly have hopes of reaching some success? So I took that mantra early on, and I worked downtown for about 3 years. And by that time, in my marketplace, I had built up clientele. So then I was able to work part from home, part from the office, and then eventually changed offices, down the road, something closer to home. But yeah, I just had the right breeding ground. And then on top of it, I watched these agents start to purchase properties themselves. And these were young guys. I mean, at that time, they're 27, 28, 29 years old, beginning to buy multifamily properties, flip multifamily properties. So again, it gave me that believability that, okay, I see, here's one of my peers, I see them doing it. I guess it isn't what I was taught about money growing up. And it was only something held exclusively for the rich, that the common person, right, even if you only had 2 nickels to rub together, truly could amass real estate over time. And I mean, I have dozens of client testimonials of primarily people who came from other countries, interestingly enough, and came here, nothing to their name, and now they own a bunch of investment real estate. And probably because they appreciate things that you and I take for granted, like free schooling, when we're in our high school years and junior years, or just whatever. And yeah, I mean, I know one of the largest multifamily investors here in Los Angeles County, he came as a foreigner and didn't come with much to his name. And so, yeah, I just had the ability to meet these kind of people along the way. And I said, well, I guess Chris can buy a triplex, And so I bought a triplex. That was the first one. Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but it reminds me of that saying. Have you heard that you were around a bunch of high performers, very solid people, hardworking, and there's that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around the most.
Yeah.
And so that makes a difference.
And now, interestingly enough, okay, so in high school, I mentioned I had my close friend. Well, 3 other buddies of mine that we went to high school with, they do the same thing that I do today. And we all were in that office at that time. So really? You could imagine, it had some plus and minuses, because you could imagine being back with your high school buddies, start making some money, so good and bad can come with it. But yeah, if you look at the average income of those individuals, not only their average income, they're all investors today.
Amazing. And so you went from being a security guard and a pizza delivery guy to becoming an agent at Remax in LA, and then buying triplex. Did you mention?
Yeah, so I purchased a triplex. Was the first one. I really cut my teeth on that one, because the way that it was structured, there was a duplex up front, a house in the back. Well, the duplex building was uninhabitable. The previous owner had started to go do some rehab, literally had taken the building to the studs in the interior and stopped there. So when I take it over, there's no plumbing, there's no electrical, there's no drywall, there's no insulation. And full disclosure, I didn't grow up with like a dad and wrenching on a car or swinging a hammer on the weekends. I'm not that guy. So I don't know what I'm looking at. But there again, just being at the right place at the right time. My father-in-law spent many years in construction, and I had befriended a couple of my clients who helped walk me through the process. And so we redid that entire building. And that's where the philosophy that I carry with me today is, when we buy a building, we go through them. The building has to underwrite such that I can swap out the electrical, the plumbing, update the kitchens and bathrooms, and still make a certain, ROI. Why? You say, well, gosh, what if you could skip all that? Well, I think that there's 2 components to this. Number one, we're doing this podcast May of 2020. So in California, we now have statewide rent control. One of the ways around that, depending on where you own, is if you do substantial improvements to a property, you can actually still vacate the units. So there's reason number one to do plumbing and electrical, so that you can vacate units that have underperforming rents, so you can get them to market. 2, many of these buildings probably will represent the vast majority of my retirement down the road. And I'm still fairly young. And so by putting all new sub panels and electrical and plumbing, I know 20 years down the road, I still won't be getting many maintenance calls, because literally they're new from the inside out. So, and I've done many of these projects, and matter of fact, today I just recorded a video of a building we just completed. My ROI, after my construction cost, the rehab cost, my initial investment, we're at about 14%.
Great. Yeah. And where are these? Where are
these ones? Are in San Bernardino County. So, so just because people might hear 14%, and if they're listening to this podcast and I don't know, Montana, they might be like, well, that's average, or whatever, right? Because cap rates are higher. But here in California, LA, San Bernardino County, people are happy if they get a 5-6% return. Here we are, where we're not only are we talking about the initial entry rate of return, we're talking about after construction costs, we're still somewhere typically between 10 to 12% on average. And so that's just my personal deal, what I do.
Yeah. And do you hold long-term? You say you do all this, renovate the plumbing and electric and the major systems. Do you plan to hold forever, or do you plan to 1031 exchange and go into larger scale?
They say everything's for sale, right? And that gets used again and again. But yeah, I've talked to enough apartment investors. Not so. It's not true, because if when there's an offer on the table, all of a sudden they're hemming and hawing. In my portfolio, there's a few though that we have done that work, but I'm not necessarily attached to them. And if I needed the money to do a 1031 exchange, then yeah, I would sell them. I've been fortunate enough, given my business, my realtor business, that we've been able to hold what we have and then just utilize cash for the additional purchases. But again, if the right deal came along and I didn't have the cash needed, and it was the equity in one of my buildings that would get me the deal, then yeah, we would sell and exchange. It's all about the rate of return. In other words, if we took a look at the rate of return on someone's equity versus a hypothetical exchange into property A, B, or C, and they find that they could definitely increase their income, there's more tax benefits for having done so, and all the rest, then why not have more of the good stuff, right? We're in this deal for cash flow. We're not in it for calls in the middle of the night, tenants that are a pain, a governor who's launched an all-out attack against landlords and all these different ordinances over the last month. That's not why we're doing it, but we deal with it. We grit our teeth because of the cash flow, because of the tax incentives, and because of the growth of our financial legacy for us initially in our retirement to have a good standard of living, and then for our heirs, and hopefully, we're talking 3-4 generations down the road. So if you could maximize and compound all those benefits, and it's all in the simple decision of doing a 1031 exchange to expand, then why not?
Right. Yeah. Similarly, I have a similar approach. And, I usually find that trading up to larger scale ends up being the way to go. So I've that's been my pattern.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the good stuff just on a larger scale. I mean, that's all it is.
Exactly. Did you find that your strategy evolved after your first triplex, and you did moved on, or maybe even learned stuff from that first one that you didn't want to repeat?
So I think where my philosophy came from was because, okay, here I finished this triplex and I literally get no calls. I never have to go to the building. I'm getting rents that are probably 15% above all my competing landlords on the same street because I have a much better product. So this was all accidental, right? And so it's almost like, do you enjoy Pirates of the Caribbean movies?
Sure.
So, Jack Sparrow, there's one scene where this whole ship blows up and the whole thing, and he's swinging on a rope, and somebody says, do you think he plans it all, or it just happens by literally, like, I didn't plan any of this, right? So it's just happening this way. But so I say, okay, I did these renovations and I'm not being bothered with any maintenance calls. I'm too big, and that's great because I'm too busy as a realtor. I'm getting higher rents than anyone else on the street. I wonder if the two can be associated, because then I look at some of my clients who literally are at the building every other day, getting calls for this and that. They literally are like the counselor and everything else of a particular property. I don't have time for that. And I'm not knocking anyone's management style. But as I look at their product type, well, they were the ones that were being chintzy when there was improvements needed and when maintenance items were needed. I didn't want that. I wanted the scenario that I had with the triplex, where literally I might go drive by the building once a quarter just to make sure someone didn't pick it up and steal it, right? I mean, literally, because there's no other reason to go. I have a better tenant base because, again, the unit type that I'm offering brought about a different tenant base, different income, socioeconomic status, where they were not a headache for me. And so then I just stuck with that formula. And I found that even in communities where somebody would say, like, for example, I have a building in Maywood. And people who know that area, if you're familiar with that area, like Maywood, Southgate, Cudahy, that area, like the 710, 105 corridor, that general, or 91 corridor. People
Okay,
say,
sure.
well, these are bread and butter tenants. Your renovations, you're spending more money than you have to. You're not going to get the type of tenant that you want. Well, there's a video on YouTube that people can go see that of a rehab that I did, where traditionally people on the same street were getting about $900 for a 1-bedroom. It's a tiny 1-bedroom, like 425 feet. at most. I mean, it really looks like a studio,
Yeah.
but it is a 1 bedroom, $1,400. So I'm able to collect $500 more. The type of tenant is different than what's in the neighborhood, not to knock any type of tenant. But what I'm getting at is these people do not call me, do not miss rent payments. And because I gutted the unit from the inside out, there's no maintenance call needed. And so I just have stuck with that. That's what works for me.
Do you focus on a specific area, or does the deal dictate where you'll invest?
Being a realtor, I've been forced to get familiar with many different communities. Because it's different than, say, a realtor who sells single family homes. Typically, they'll sell homes maybe in one city, two cities, depending on how large the city and how many homes, right? But if you're going to succeed in apartment sales, you have to work several communities in order for there to be enough inventory to, be able to put things together. So having worked with clients who had interest in these various communities, I learned alongside them what were the asking rates, what was the tenant base, what was the direction of the values in these different communities. And that really has helped me so that I can feel comfortable owning in East LA, Maywood, San Bernardino County, these different areas that really are quite different from each other, but also very similar when you understand, the type of tenant base that you can attract in each of those areas.
Sure, that makes sense. What do you look for? Like if you're going out, if you have some money to invest, what do you look for in a deal? What makes a good deal for you?
Well, obviously, my choices right now are dictated by cash flow. I need I'm not at a point where I'm buying trophy type properties just for the depreciation, right? So I have some clients that are at that point in their investment life. They make enough income from their holdings. I have one client who told me, Chris, you have enough units when the laundry income can pay for your lifestyle, right? And so I thought, what, I'm going to steal that one. That's a great idea. The laundry income takes care of everything and the rents are on top. But so, I'm not one of these individuals. I'm still in the building phases. As you know, I have a large family to provide for. I have 7 children. Our 8th child is on the way. So cash flow is king. So the deal is first dictated by cash flow. If it needs work, I'm not interested in like structural issues and like major stuff like this. I'll do the lipstick type stuff and the renovations and even plumbing and electrical. That's not that big of a deal, even though it seems like it could be quite daunting. I've learned over time it's really not that what goes into it. But structural, yeah, I'm not dealing with structural. If it's really gang infested, I'll pass. Even if it's not on that property. So I am also sensitive to the tenant demographic in the area. But yeah, cash flow is first and foremost on my mind.
With 8 kids, I could only imagine.
Yeah, it's not for the weak. So,
is there a mistake or failure that you experienced early on that you learned a lot from that you do differently now?
So you're talking just from the investment side?
From the investment side, yeah, that maybe you learned from and it's become a key to your success now.
That triplex I didn't exchange early enough.
Okay.
Early, yeah. I had got somewhat attached to it. It was my first one. And again, I had redone the entire thing from the studs. And as I looked at other properties, I was overestimating the quality of this 3-unit that I had versus what was the opportunity if I would have sold that and bought a 6-unit, 7 or 8-unit. And I eventually did that. I sold that 3-unit and I bought an 8-unit, but I completed that probably 3 years after I really should have done it. And so I would have had more growth. And so I would say that just being busy with my realtor side of the business, representing investors, purchasing, buying, selling apartments. I didn't necessarily address my own investments well enough because, again, I wasn't getting calls. Our rents were well above market, so they were performing. And just here over the last 2 years, I've gotten more aggressive where it's like, okay, now we need to start exchanging and doing some different things.
Right. I had a similar experience. I think I had an emotional attachment to my first duplex, and I held it for a long time. And then as you do more and more deals, you become more dispassionate and just more, there's no emotion. The emotions have gone away. It's all analytical. Like, does this make sense or not?
Right. I mean, well, we all think about our first crush, right? And so that has some space in our mind and our heart. But your wife isn't going to be happy if you hang on to that for too long, right? So you got to let it go, move on to the better stuff. So that's what I would say.
What do you see happening in the multifamily market in the
So
next year?
this health crisis, this virus, really threw us a curveball. But I think it magnified what was already coming. In other words, the stock market for the last year and a half of people that I respect who are in the market, people, they've been screaming from the rooftops, hey, there's going to be an adjustment. We're due for an adjustment. So this virus comes along and only compounds the adjustment that we were due for. Well, I would say in like kind for multifamily. You had a situation where tenants were already spending over 50% of their discretionary income for rent. How much more could we really push the rental rates beyond where we are now? And then with that came the various city and county and state tenant protections in terms of rent control and what have you. So that opportunity is now gone. You really have to buy a deal, depending on where we're talking about, on face value and not on speculation. At the same time, you have most commercial lenders that have jumped their interest rates on commercial loans. Even though the Fed has lowered rates, commercial rates have gone up. The lending requirements, at least as the recording of this, are much more stringent. They're asking 6 to 12 months reserves in impound accounts and all sorts of things. This is going to have an impact. We just don't know how much. If you talk about what have I seen the last 30 days, nothing's moved. I mean, almost next to no properties have sold. We don't know what that means long term. I would say probably by August, we'll have a sense of, okay, what buildings were listed during this pandemic? What did they finally sell for? That'll give us some indication of what this all meant to the marketplace. And then depending on the prospects of procuring loans at that point, we'll see, where that pushes cap rates, because you have to have a spread between the cap rate and the interest rate, because you can't have a situation where I guess you could, but you shouldn't be buying a deal where the cap rate is lower than the interest rate, because you're losing money on the money borrowed. So in other words, if we just went from banks lending at 3.5%, now let's say at 4.5%, well, does that mean we just push prices to 5 caps? We just went from a 4 cap to a 5 cap. I don't know. There's not enough data yet. But if things stay on the trajectory that I currently see them, I think that's a fair guess.
That makes sense. And that seems to be what has happened in the past.
Right. We had a big educational event slated for March. It's something we typically do, live audience. Well, of course, literally Thursday, March 19th, we changed this to be a live webinar because they limited the size of groups. Literally 2 weeks prior to this event, every other day, the governor would say, okay, no gatherings more than 100 people, no gatherings more than 50. And so anyways, we switched it to a live webinar. And March 20th is when he issued the stay-at-home order. But the reason why I bring that up is all the data that I had collected for my presentation at that event had nothing to do with coronavirus. I was just going to give the landlords an update on where was the marketplace.
Sure.
And so it wasn't front-loaded, is what I'm getting at. And if you look at the data, it would already tell you that values had already started trailing sideways. Even with great rental rates, even with historically low interest rates, because interest rates had come down again at that point, we still were trailing sideways. You didn't see the next highest price per unit being sold or the next historically low cap rate. So things were already adjusting, had started to adjust. And so we'll see how much of an adjustment that's going to mean at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Interesting times, fascinating times. I'm sure we're going to look back and what a learning opportunity, to just sit and watch how this thing unfolds.
Yeah, it has been an I mean, when you have people buying toilet paper to fight a respiratory disease, I mean, it's interesting times, right?
Right. So a good way to segue into what I call multifamily psychotherapy. What's a
Right.
trait you possess that has served you best, both in real estate and life?
I think persistence, whether it was being persistent to win the hand of my wife, or being persistent when I first started learning the business, or being persistent to be a good student, to literally sit at the feet of other landlords to say, okay, what and how are they doing what they've done, and can I do the same? If I get the data, I'm willing to persist until I get the outcome.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like, everybody knows Warren Buffett and all his quotes, but I just discovered a new one that came from him the other day. That was, temperament is more important than knowledge in investing. And that is related to persistence, as like, you don't want to run hot and flare out. You just got to do this thing over and over and over again over decades
Yeah, and
to
if we're
succeed.
talking about investing, I mean, right now we're focused on, hey, the stock market lost a third, and what's going on. But we know, at least if we're talking multifamily, you go back 10, 15, 20 years. My team and I were just having this discussion. Go back 50 years, and there's been different economic issues along the way. Well, guess what? Values have always gone up at some point. And so I think we can still rest assured that maybe not 6 months from now, but at some point values will go up.
How about, is there a trait that holds you back that you feel like you still need to work on?
I'm an A-type personality, and I sometimes err on the side of being too straightforward, just because salesmen kill me, where they're just talking in circles, and you could tell they're smiling with their grin, but not with their eyes, if you know what I mean, right? So it's they have ill intentions, and so they're just trying to persuade somebody to do something maybe against their own. It's like, look, here's what it is. It can't be anything other than what it is, and if that makes sense to you, then it makes sense. If not, I'm okay with that. But I probably have cost myself a listing or two, or different things, because I'm just that type. I'm just an A type. I just no filter. I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking.
That's great. Well, great. Well, to wrap it up, I was going to do the question round. So here we go. The book that you've recommended the most over the past year.
Well, just here recently with the economic issues, I've been suggesting or recommending Unshakable by Tony Robbins.
Sure.
But
That's his financial book, right?
yeah, and it's a much more condensed version of the previous book he did about a year prior, called Money Master the Game, which I would suggest anyone read. It's primarily geared towards investing in stocks, but he also does address real estate. But I just think it gives you, if you're a 100% real estate guy like myself, it's a quick primer to get you to fully understand what you need to seek the advice if you want to go into the stock market, especially since there's opportunity. But that's just here recently. Other than that, it's always Think and Grow Rich. That has been one of my go-to that I refer people to all the time.
Right. A staple. How about a favorite quote?
St. Augustine: pray as if everything depended on God, and work as though everything depended on you.
That's great. I like it. An online tool or app that brings you the most value.
Well, of late, Zoom, right? I mean, this
Zoom.
is how I've been able to work satellite with my team. Other than that, YouTube, because we've taken a lot of our educational content, and what we would have done in text 5 years ago, it's all video today. So God bless YouTube.
Great. What's your most impressive, totally useless skill?
I give analogies for everything, like what conversation. Yeah. Like, I don't know, these different analogies come to mind, and yeah. Anyways,
that's very good. Aside from real estate, one thing you could spend all day talking about.
Metaphysics. That's a whole nother side of me. I enjoy the study of metaphysics. I've for many years now, I've taught the youth at our church, and so I enjoy philosophy, metaphysics, theology. Yeah, that's my deal.
I love it. What decade created the greatest music?
So my kids know me. So I mean, I really appreciate old school hip hop and R&B. So I would say late 80s, right?
Late 80s.
Late
Who is
80s hip hop, where you have the
Boys to Men?
LLJs and the NWAs and these guys come in. And yeah, just before early 90s, where you have all the Boys to Men and these groups. Yeah, that's some of the good stuff.
What country has the best accent?
The Irish. I really like the Irish accent.
I've gotten a different answer for that every time. I thought a lot of people would say French, but great. Irish is fun.
I just like the swag, like Conor McGregor. I just like that whole,
the brogue.
Right, exactly.
What movie can you quote the most from?
Rush Hour.
Rush Hour, all right.
Yeah, there's nothing like, I remember seeing that early college, and just going back and forth between Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, just some good stuff there.
Right. And here's one that might make your wife jealous, but a childhood cartoon character you had a crush on.
Oh, I don't remember her name, but the girl figure in Roger Rabbit.
Jessica? Is it Jessica Rabbit?
Jessica was hot, man. Jessica was hot.
She was hot. I never saw that movie, incidentally.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I got to watch it.
You got to show that one to you. I don't know how old your kids are, but you got to have them take a look at that one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's good. All right. I'm always looking for kid movies I could watch with them. If you could have the answer to one question, what would it be?
The winning numbers to the next lotto.
Good, great. And lastly, when are you happiest?
And I'm just hanging out with the family. When we're on vacation, we enjoy going to Coronado Island, but just spend a lot of time on my business. My wife respects that. My kids respect my time that I need away. So it's great when we can all just be together and I can turn the phone off. I think that's what's really, at the end of the whole thing, it's going to be these memories we create. We're not going to be saying how many units and cap rate, obviously that provides a means for us right now, but you're a father, so you can appreciate where I'm going. It's about these memories we're building with these kids. Yeah,
definitely. And finally, where can listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, so if you've been interested to catch any of these videos that have been referenced, you can go over to YouTube, YouTube/The Apartment Dealer. You can follow us on Facebook, The Apartment Dealer, Instagram, The Apartment Dealer. Just Google The Apartment Dealer, and you can find Chris German everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for taking time out of your busy day with your big family, and keep doing what you're doing. It's been great, and it's really helpful.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and everyone be safe, be well. We're almost out of this thing.
Well, that's about it. See you guys next time. Thank you for joining us for the Wild West Real Estate Show. If you like what we're attempting to do here, please subscribe so we can continue sharing these with you. And if you want to check out our website, it's quantumcapitalinc.com. You'll find podcast episodes as well as multifamily properties we're looking at and how you could potentially participate. Look forward to seeing you guys soon on the Wild West Real Estate Show.